The cabin shuddered. At first, it was like turbulence. Then the sound came, a hollow, cracking thunder that tore through the fuselage. Something ripped open. Air sucked backward in a violent gust. I saw daylight slash through the cabin wall near row 14. A woman screamed. Then others followed. Oxygen masks dropped like pendulums. The lights flickered, casting ghostly shadows across the aisle, and then everything went dark. I heard someone yell, sharp, urgent, "Him." Row 21. Now, there was a pause, a split second of disbelief. Someone muttered close by, "You mean that old guy?" That was me. Seat 21C. Aisle. Flannel shirt. Baseball cap pulled low. I stood up. I didn't say anything. Didn't hesitate. Just moved forward, steady on my feet, bracing against the tilting cabin. I could feel the slope of the jet's bank in my knees. We were falling. Not fast yet, but uncontrolled. Nobody knew me. I hadn't spoken to anyone since I boarded in Minneapolis. People don't notice quiet men in their 50s with a limp and soft eyes. No one saw the calluses on my palms or the way I watched the wing flex during takeoff. They didn't know that once, a long time ago, I'd flown things much faster than this. Scarier things. Experimental birds that shook your bones when you pushed them past the red line. Name's Tom Ridley. Used to fly for the Navy. VX-23 out of Patuxent River. We were the ones who tested everything that wasn't supposed to work. I haven't sat in a cockpit in years. But when I reached the flight deck door and saw the lead flight attendant, Erica, I'd learn later, standing there pale and wide-eyed, I knew exactly where I was supposed to be. "Sir," she stammered, her voice shaking. "Who are you?" "Former Navy," I said. "F-18 test pilot." She looked past me to the smoke curling from the cabin wall. She looked at the captain, slumped over the controls. Then she stepped aside. Inside, it was chaos. Warning lights everywhere. Left engine dead. Right engine flamed out. Hydraulic failure blinking red. Cabin pressure dropped below safe threshold. The captain tried to sit up, tried to speak. His face was gray, his breathing shallow. I strapped into the right seat. My hands found the controls without thought. The rhythm came back like breath. One switch, then another. Checklist in my head. Not panic. Muscle memory. I was home. The yoke felt familiar in my hands. Worn plastic. A bit looser than I was used to, but functional. I glanced at the instrument cluster. Altimeter was ticking down, fast. We were dropping without thrust. The airspeed held for now, but without intervention, we'd stall inside of 3 minutes. I adjusted pitch trim manual, feeling the nose react. Not much control authority left. The rudder was slow. Elevator response uneven. I tried the radio. Cheyenne Center, American 194, do you read? Nothing but static. I flipped the backup transceiver, tried again. Cheyenne, this is Thomas Ridley, assuming command of Flight 194. We've got structural breach, double engine failure, an incapacitated flight crew. Request emergency clearance and glide path options. Still nothing. Erica leaned in from behind. "We lost comms right after the breach," she said. "We tried relaying through another plane overhead, but no response yet." "Okay," I said, and turned to her. "We've got one shot. I'm going to glide us in. You keep the cabin calm." She nodded, hesitated. "Is that even possible? This big of a jet?" "I've done worse," I said. And I had. But never with this many souls behind me. I pulled the circuit breaker for the failed radio, then rebooted a secondary channel. The frequency lit up. "Cheyenne Center, confirm, this is Ridley on Flight 194. Gliding. Total engine loss. Require landing site vector." A beat. Then, "Flight 194, confirm, Ridley, as in Commander Thomas Ridley." "I'm not a commander anymore," I replied. "But yes." The pause on the other end felt like it stretched forever. Then, calm and firm, "Copy that. You've got every runway we've got. Closest flat terrain is a dry lake bed 2 miles east of Rawlins. Wind from 0-20 at 8 knots. Surface is compact snow and ice. Use caution." I glanced at the chart screen. Rawlins was barely a blip. But the terrain. I remembered that lake bed. Winter drills, long ago. If I angled it just right. Understood. Redirecting approach. I adjusted our bearing. No autopilot. Every move by hand now. I felt the sluggish response of a dead airframe. She wanted to sink. But with enough altitude and the right angle, we could ride the air like a stone over water. Behind me, I could hear muffled sobs. Children crying. A voice asking for prayers. Erica was working her way through the cabin, keeping order, pointing to me. They'd probably never see my face, but they were watching me now through that half-open door. That was when the whispers began. I heard them, even through the static and metal groans. "Some retiree's gonna fly us now. Is this a joke? What if he forgets something?" I didn't blame them. I really didn't. Fear makes people cruel. I'd seen it before. Guys talking tough in the barracks, then folding when the wind shear hits. And then others, quiet ones, like I'd tried to be, who just do the damn job. So I focused. Nose down slightly. Preserve airspeed. We were coming up on stall margin. I kept talking to the tower, giving updates. Wind speed, elevation, possible touchdown vectors. I heard Cheyenne control again, voice steadier this time. Commander Ridley, wind just shifted. Slight crosswind from northeast. Recommend crab on final approach. Copy. I eased the yoke left, the rudder right, coaxing a side slip to keep the nose aligned. The descent rate was high now, too high. I'd have to flatten it out near ground effect, bleed airspeed just enough not to lose lift. Erica returned to the cockpit. People are scared, she said quietly. But they're watching you. Tell them to sit tight. Keep their masks on. And buckle in tight. She nodded and disappeared again. Outside, the lake bed came into view, a long, narrow field of snow-dusted ice, framed by low pines and a rise of rocks on the north edge. No lights, no beacons, no second chances. I lowered the gear manually, took both hands. The lever groaned as I locked it. I prayed the gear would hold. As we descended, time warped. I wasn't 50 anymore. I was 31 again, pulling a damaged bird out of a dive over the Chesapeake, bleeding hydraulics, no ejection route. That time, I made it. I intended to make it now. Altitude 10,000 and falling. I eased back pressure, just a hair, letting her ride the lift. The ground came up slow, like a rising tide. The lake bed looked glassy from up here, smooth enough, though I knew better. There'd be wind shear, surface drag, maybe ice ridges. But it was wide, and it was flat, and that's what I needed. The silence in the cockpit was thick now. No engine hum, just the faint hiss of airflow and the creak of fuselage tension. A powerless aircraft doesn't fly, it glides. And a glide this long, this heavy, with 142 lives in the cabin, it wasn't supposed to happen. But it was happening. The captain beside me was barely conscious. His head lolled with the banking of the aircraft. I checked his vitals once more, shallow breaths, pulse present. He was out of the game. I thought of the men I'd flown with in the Navy. Some gone, some still out there, scattered across contractor jobs, reserve commands, hospital beds. I hadn't seen most in years. I hadn't expected to. But right now, I felt them with me. Cheyenne, this is Flight 194. Final glide path confirmed. Touchdown vector bearing 017. Landing gear down. All systems manual. You're clear. Flight 194. Wind steady. All emergency crews en route. Good luck, Commander. I didn't answer. Just focused. The ice shimmered below us. Trees flanked the north edge of the lake, tall pines, unmoving in the cold morning light. The snow cover was thin enough to see patches of frozen mud beneath. Not perfect, but it would do. Passing through 2000, I said aloud. No response. Just my voice, my hands. In the rearview mirror above the throttle quadrant, I caught my own reflection. Older than I remembered. Lines deeper. Eyes sharper. I adjusted trim, eased her nose up slightly to extend the flare window. Behind me, Erica's voice came over the intercom. Cabin secure. Everyone seated. We're with you, sir. I didn't look back. Just nodded once. I'd always believed flying wasn't about control. It was about surrendering to physics, understanding the air. You couldn't fight it. You had to dance with it. And now, there was no power, no push, just momentum, lift, gravity. 800 feet. I could see the texture of the lake bed now. Snow ridges, some drifted, others packed hard by wind. A faint glint of surface ice caught my eye, too far left. I corrected, tiny rudder tap, slipped back into the groove. 500 feet. The flaps, locked at partial deployment. Enough to add drag but not stall. The airframe vibrated gently. She wanted to drop, but I held her up. Ground effect took over. That sweet cushion of air pushing back as we skimmed the surface. I eased her nose up. Airspeed decaying fast, too fast, but not too fast. Come on, I whispered. Wheels touched. Not a slam, but not smooth either. The left gear hit first, then the right. The nose held a second, then dropped. The sound was like thunder in reverse, skidding metal, grinding ice. I held the yoke firm, fighting the pull to the left. Brakes were dead. No hydraulics. Just drag and snow. The aircraft slowed, slid, then stopped. Nose down, but upright. In one piece. Silence. Then screams. Not terror, relief. Then sobs. Then a name. He did it. I sat there a moment, breath still shallow, the cold creeping in. Erica burst in seconds later, tears on her cheeks. Everyone's alive. Every last one. I exhaled, long and steady. I didn't say anything. Just unbuckled and opened the side window to breathe the icy air. Snow blew in, stinging my skin. But I didn't care. This was the kind of silence I remembered. After a while, I stood. My legs ached, my back stiff. But I moved. Down the narrow stairway. Into the snow. The first responders were still minutes out, stuck on the road north of Rawlins. But I didn't wait for them. Instead, I walked the perimeter, checked the gear struts, the wing integrity, the fuselage seam. Some called it trauma response. For me, it was habit. Ritual. A young woman stepped out of the forward door. I think she was a teacher. Her eyes wide, hands trembling. She didn't say anything at first. Then she whispered, "You saved my daughter." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded and moved on. Later, they brought blankets, buses, cameras. They asked for interviews, names. I declined. Erica gave them my first name, nothing more. By the time I left the lake bed, I'd already become a headline. But that's not what mattered. What mattered was that the wind had held, that the wings remembered, that the silence I'd lived in for years had meant something, when it counted. The debrief was short. A few men in windbreakers met me by the perimeter line. FAA, NTSB, Cheyenne Field Office. They knew my name now. One recognized me before I spoke. He offered his hand, and I shook it, but I didn't hold on. "I'd like to go home," I said. That was all. He nodded, like he understood. They'd send recovery crews, tugs, black boxes, simulations. Some would call it luck, others would praise training. But I knew better. Flying's a form of memory, and I had thousands of hours stitched into my bones. They offered to drive me into town. I declined. I called a cab. When it arrived, I asked for the long route, around the lake bed, through the old Ranger Trail, past the radio towers that used to ping my bird when I was younger and more reckless. The town came into view like something half-remembered. Low roofs, snow-patched roads, a single motel with a faded red neon sign blinking against the afternoon gray. I checked in under a different name. No one questioned it. I sat in that room for 2 days. No TV, no lights, just watched the wind move snow along the windowsill. I didn't answer the phone, though it rang. First once, then again, then stopped. On the third morning, I walked to the diner across the street. Coffee was burnt, eggs overcooked, but the waitress smiled when she poured my cup and didn't ask questions. The town was quiet. Most people hadn't made the connection yet. Flight 194 was national news, but the man behind the controls remained a footnote. I preferred it that way. But the silence didn't last. I was halfway through my toast when the door jingled and a man in uniform stepped inside. Not police, not local, Navy. He saw me, walked over, didn't sit. "Commander Ridley," he said. "Used to be." "Sir," he said again, and placed something on the table. A manila envelope, sealed. My name typed on it. Rank, service ID. I didn't open it. "What is it?" "Reinstatement request," he said. "Honorary, plus citation for civilian valor. Senate's reviewing it." I stared at the envelope. "I don't want it," I said. He paused. "You saved 142 lives." I nodded. "Then let them live. That's enough." He left without pushing. Left the envelope on the table. I didn't touch it for hours. When I got back to the motel, it was still snowing. The room was as I left it. Empty bed, folded clothes. I sat on the edge of the mattress and looked at the envelope for a long time. I finally opened it. Inside wasn't a medal or papers, just a letter. Typed, but with a signature at the bottom I recognized, Rear Admiral C. R. Halverson. I hadn't heard his name in 20 years. Last I knew, he'd moved to procurement. Now he was command level. The letter was simple. No fanfare. "Ridley, some men age out, others drift, but a few disappear, not because they're finished, but because they've already given more than we knew how to ask. You were one of those. I heard what you did. I wasn't surprised. Don't come back unless you want to. But know this, we remember. We still do. CRH. I folded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, then slid it into the drawer of the nightstand and closed it. That night, I dreamed of carrier decks, of night landings, the kind where you can't see the edge, just the lights and the wind and the steel beneath you. In the morning, I caught a Greyhound. Didn't say goodbye. Salt Lake City was quiet in March. Still cold enough for breath to fog the air. I walked home from the bus stop. Just my boots on sidewalk. No parade. No reporters. Just the wind and the fence I hadn't finished fixing. When I stepped into my house, I left the door open for a while. Let the air move through the rooms. No one had touched anything. Same books. Same jacket over the kitchen chair. Same picture of my daughter tucked behind the magnet on the fridge. I picked up the phone. Checked the messages. A few from old numbers. One from Erica, the flight attendant. She didn't say much. Just, "They're calling you a hero. Thought you should know. Thank you." I didn't call back. Didn't know what to say. But I sat down at the kitchen table, closed my eyes, and let the quiet settle over me like a blanket. They'd say I saved them, but I think it was the other way around. Because in that cockpit, for the first time in years, I remembered who I was. Not the man who fixed fences and kept to himself, but the one who flew into fire because no one else would. I didn't expect the letter. It came 2 weeks after I got home, tucked in a simple white envelope. No return address. Just my name, handwritten in block letters that reminded me of flight logs, precise, deliberate. Inside was a note. "Brief. Careful. You don't know me. My name is Sarah Lang. My son was in seat 17A on your flight. He's 6. You saved him. That's not something we forget." Below it was a drawing. Crayon on printer paper. A plane, wobbly and too round, but recognizable. A stick figure beside it, in a blue cap. Above it, 3 words in shaky red letters. "Thank you, Tom." I stared at it for a long time. I pinned it to the fridge next to my daughter's graduation photo. That was the first letter. Then came others. A man in a wheelchair from 14B. A couple from Boston who had been asleep when the breach happened. A teenage girl who said she used to be afraid of flying. They found me somehow. Most just sent a few words. Some didn't sign at all. But every one of them thanked me. I didn't know what to do with that. For most of my life, silence had been the measure of worth. You did your job, you carried the weight, and you moved on. The only applause came from the clean hum of an engine that held through a storm. So I kept their letters. Every one. I put them in an old ammo box I hadn't touched in years. But what I didn't do, what I still couldn't, was respond. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't know how to carry the noise of gratitude after so many years of being invisible. It's easier to shoulder guilt than thanks. That's the truth. Then one night, a car pulled into my driveway. Black sedan. Civilian plates. I stepped out onto the porch, flannel shirt buttoned to the neck, mug in hand. A woman climbed out. Mid-40s. Brown hair pulled back. A hard coat against the wind. "Tom Ridley?" she asked. I nodded. "I'm Captain Erica Jenkins," she said. "We met on Flight 194. I didn't move." She held up a folder, then lowered it. "I didn't come for a statement or press. I came to say something I didn't get to on the lake bed." I stepped aside, motioned toward the bench on the porch. She sat. The wind moved softly through the pines. Snow clung to the eaves. "I watched you," she said. "Back there. I saw what you did. Not just flying, but the calm. The way you didn't talk unless it mattered. The way you sat there like nothing could shake you." I didn't answer. She continued. "I spent 8 years flying commercial. 5 before that in the reserves. I've seen a lot of crews. I've read all the manuals. But I've never seen someone land a plane like that." Still, I stayed quiet. "I guess I just needed to know," she said finally. "What happens next? For someone like you." That made me look at her. "Nothing happens next," I said. "That's the point. You do the job. Then you go home." She nodded. "That's what I thought. But it doesn't feel right. It isn't supposed to." She stood, brushed the snow off her coat. "I'm not here to pull you back into anything. But if you ever want to teach, if you ever want to say something, I know a few people who'd listen." She handed me a card. "Flight School, Montana." Her number in pen on the back. Then she was gone. The snow fell heavier that night. I watched it from the window, her taillights vanishing into the dark. The card sat on my counter for days. I didn't touch it. Not because I wasn't interested, but because I was afraid. Afraid that if I stepped into that room, with young eyes looking to me for answers, I wouldn't know what to say. That all I had left was instinct. Old reflexes. That what I'd done was a ghost of who I used to be. Still, I kept the card. 3 weeks later, I called. The flight school was housed in a hangar outside Missoula. Old airfield. Faded lines on the tarmac. Nothing fancy. One of those places where the wind carries the echo of propellers even when the planes are silent. They didn't know who I was when I walked in. Didn't recognize the name. Didn't ask. That was part of the draw. The students were young. Early 20s, mostly. 1 or 2 older. Eyes wide with ambition. Fear tucked behind bravado. I knew the type. I'd been the type. Erica had told them I'd flown Navy. That I had experience in emergencies. Nothing more. That was all I wanted. She met me in the hangar office. She didn't smile, not quite, but her eyes softened. "You came. Don't make a thing of it." She nodded. "We're not." My first class was small. 4 students. We sat in a cold room with folding chairs and a whiteboard that hadn't been cleaned properly in weeks. I wrote one word on the board. Decision. Then I turned and looked at them. They were waiting for diagrams. Lectures. Maybe a story. I didn't give them one. "Everything about flight," I said, "boils down to decisions. Good, bad, or late. Make the right one at the wrong time, people die. Make the wrong one quickly, people might still live. But freeze?" I tapped the board. "Then it's over." They listened. I kept the session short. 40 minutes. No small talk. No storytelling. But after they left, one of them, Maria, red ball cap, quiet eyes, hung back. She stepped forward, hesitant. "Sir, don't call me that." She nodded. "Sorry. I wanted to ask. Was it you?" I said nothing. "Flight 194. The one that landed in Rawlins." Still nothing. She studied my face. Didn't press. Just nodded. "I thought so." Then she left. The next day, 6 more students showed up. By the end of the month, I was teaching 3 classes a week. Not for pay. I didn't need it. I had my pension, my fence, and a quiet town with a diner that remembered my coffee order. But something shifted. I started carrying a logbook again. Not for flight time. For memory. I wrote down what they asked, what they feared, what they did when the simulator shook and the lights dimmed. I studied them the way I used to study pressure gauges and wind angles. And slowly, I began to speak, not just about mechanics, but about what happens when the checklist ends and instinct begins, about the sound of silence in a dead cockpit, about the difference between panic and urgency, about what it means to carry 142 hearts behind your back and still keep your hands steady. They didn't ask for stories, but I gave them pieces, not all of it, just enough. Erica sat in on one session, didn't speak, just watched from the corner. Afterward, she walked up to me. "You're good at this." "I'm not trying to be. That's why it works." There were offers after that, from other schools, from networks. One producer even called, said he wanted to tell the human side of the miracle on ice. I hung up before he finished, because it wasn't a miracle. It was physics, instinct, and a refusal to give in. But not all calls were unwelcome. One came from a name I hadn't heard in years, Captain Davis. Navy, retired now. He'd been my CO during one of our last test runs in Patuxent River. He'd heard, somehow, "You back in the air?" "Sort of." He laughed. "Figures. You always flew better with no engines anyway." We talked an hour. Caught up on who'd passed, who was sick, who'd disappeared. He told me about a reunion planned in Norfolk. VX-23 crew. Nothing big. Just a few old pilots and their ghosts. I said I'd think about it. And I did. That night, I pulled out the box. Letters from passengers. The crayon drawing. Halverson's letter. The dog tags I hadn't worn since my last flight suit rusted out. I laid them all on the table. Then I sat. Just sat. I didn't cry. I don't do that. But I closed my eyes. Let the weight settle. Not like a burden. Like a gravity I'd earned. The reunion wasn't what I expected. No flags. No music. Just a rented room in a quiet hotel with too much carpet and too little light. About a dozen of US showed. Older. Grayer. Thinner. Some used canes. A few sat the whole time. But their eyes, those hadn't aged at all. They recognized me. Some nodded. Others came to shake my hand. But no one said, "Hero." They didn't have to. That wasn't our language. Captain Davis stood up once, raised a glass. "To Ridley," he said, "still flying without power." There was laughter. Not loud, but real. I didn't speak that night. Just listen. Let the stories wash over me. Some old, some half-true, some pulled from silence after 30 years. And I realized something. All those years I thought I was alone. I wasn't. I'd just forgotten how to be seen. That night, back in my hotel room, I opened the window. Let the sea air in. Thought about the lake bed. About the sound the plane made when it touched down. About the silence after. They say when you save lives, you carry them. But I don't think that's true. I think they carry you, too, back into the world, back into yourself. I still live quiet. I still fix my fence. Still walk to the diner for eggs and burnt coffee. But every now and then, I feel it again. That stillness in the air. The pitch of gravity and lift held in balance. And I remember, I didn't stop being a pilot. I just needed the sky to remind me.